Okay, well, good morning here on this beautiful Monday. And as I look at the chat, a lot of good things going on over the weekend. But of course, most importantly is just give some time here for you to relax, and then also spend some time with um, family is always good. And if you did get an opportunity to do some things, maybe a little different, fantastic as well. Um, Looks like we got some sport highlights as well. I think with the advent of cable TV there early in the late 70s, early 80s, I think it became a little bit easier for us to maybe follow some teams, sports teams outside the great state of Minnesota, and watch some of those other clubs as well. Yeah, and the Minnesota Vikings did find a way to endure some overtime and succeed. So they are back to 500. All right. So yeah, continue to put some things in the chat here of your highlight for the weekend. For me, on Friday, I was gone, but took some time to take my daughter to the University of St. Thomas and do a visit. And realistically, it was a visit in which it was self-directed, and they gave you an app, and you just walked around the campus, and you went to building to building. So it's not like you really interacted with individuals on the tour. So that was a little different. And I think if I was going to throw another highlight in there, I do like to celebrate various traditions with both sides of my family in terms of maybe things to connect with who or what makes up my family. And there's a German side of it. And so this weekend, yesterday, we continued to celebrate the tradition of St. Nicholas Day. So we had that piece there. And of course, on my indigenous side, we do take times periodically throughout the year to give thanks and have little moments of Thanksgiving as well. So a lot of good stuff happening this weekend. All right. So with that, you could see kind of like our agenda for the day. And we want to continue with the great study of the Great Depression here, and look at Franklin D. Roosevelt. On Friday, you had started working on the new assignment, which is due today, and so we'll have some time in class to work on it. And it's New Deal, overhaul or overthrow. And so, just to recap a little bit about Herbert Hoover again. He was going into the presidency as really someone who could potentially fit the role to help the United States out in a very difficult moment like the Great Depression. After all, he was the great humanitarian. But as the Great Depression unfolded during his administration, he kind of strayed from, one could say, that image of the great humanitarian, and just struggled throughout those years to really kind of get a handle of the economic issues facing the United States. And ultimately, it cost his re-election bid in 1932, and we moved in the direction of Franklin D. Roosevelt. So I want to start off here. I got a little video clip here on Franklin D. Roosevelt, and see if we can think of some takeaways or some thoughts about FDR, and then we'll move forward with that. Okay, so always, if you have questions, you can always put that in the chat, or you can just stop me and we can address it at that point. All right, so I've got a little video clip here, so hang tight.
The last time our nation's economy nearly ground to a halt, a newly elected president with the initials FDR tried just about everything to get it moving again. He led with bold actions and inspiring words. This morning, we look back to those times with two reports. We begin with John Dickerson.
Long lines for food, for relief, fear and despair. Though black and white, the pictures from the Great Depression echo America in the COVID era. National suffering and frustration. The virus is new, the struggle is not.
Our greatest primary task is to put people to work.
In 1933, newly elected Franklin Delano Roosevelt confronted 25% unemployment, the collapse of banking, and sweeping poverty. His response would reshape the way the country thought about itself, its president, and democracy.
The United States was in the fetal position, and people really wondered whether we would ever get out of this.
Jonathan Alter is author of The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and the Triumph of Hope. We spoke inside the Manhattan home where Roosevelt slept the night he learned that he had won the presidency.
Roosevelt believed in what he called action and action now.
This nation is asking for action and action now.
And he used that word in his inaugural address 6 times. It actually got more applause than the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
While Roosevelt was ready for action, he had to make sure the country was too. At a time when the tenets of democracy itself were being questioned, he recast the social contract, convincing the American public they were all in it together.
What is the New Deal? It's a deal between the government and the people on what they expect of one another. And before Roosevelt was president, it was basically every man for himself. Rugged individualism, you know.
The only real contact the American people had with the federal government was when they went to the post office to buy a stamp. Roosevelt changed all of that.
He changed it by offering information and hope, says professor and historian David Woolner at the Roosevelt family estate in Hyde Park, New York.
People would gather around their radios and they would listen to their president explain what the government was trying to do. And this was very, very reassuring.
The famous fireside chats were few in number, but were symbolic of a connection between the patrician Roosevelt and those suffering with poverty. Something the president understood because he had suffered, says Susan Dunn, a Roosevelt scholar at Williams College.
I would say that the symbol of his presidency, of his life, is Warm Springs, Georgia.
Roosevelt was stricken with polio in 1921. He never walked again. During his recovery, he built a facility in Warm Springs, Georgia for other polio sufferers and took charge of its operation.
And it helped him to relate to all kinds of people. It's leading a life of kindness, of respect, of responsibility for the people we know, as well as for the people we don't know. That's what a real democracy requires. That's the moral basis of democracy.
With the country's support for his spirit of experimentation, Roosevelt unleashed a flock of programs.
They went to work building the infrastructure of this country in ways that are almost unimaginable now. They built 39,000 schools, 2,500 hospitals, more than 300 airports, 800 state parks.
The Hoover Dam, the Lincoln Tunnel, the Tennessee Valley Authority, among the many major projects created with a Congress willing to work with the president. That didn't mean Roosevelt was without enemies.
I think there's a kind of an assumption that everything for him worked, but he had very, very strong opposition. There was plenty of partisanship, and there were plenty of Republicans and some Democrats who thought that he was becoming a dictator.
Soon enough, Roosevelt would be fighting real dictators in the Second World War, which ultimately lifted the country out of the Depression. America became a beacon for the world, and its leader, Roosevelt, offered a new way to measure the worth of a nation.
And he said, you know, the test of our progress is not whether we provide much to those who have much, but whether we provide enough to those who have too little.
That is the test posed by FDR for America's leaders today, not just to survive, but to plot a course for a way to emerge from this crisis stronger.
All right. Does anyone have like any feedbacks on it? This little video clip had connections with today's pandemic that we're living with, COVID-19. Does anyone like have any like immediate thoughts about what they saw about FDR and his approach to this economic crisis that becomes the Great Depression? You can put that in the chat as well. So I think in that little clip, there was a number of things that he brought up. And I think, you know, when I look, also when I look in the chat here, Tekia, your thoughts on that, what people should expect from the government. I think that was definitely, you know, something that was being analyzed at that point in time. You know, what is the role of government? And I think, you know, that's something that we continue to think about, especially in today, you know, as we jump into another round of maybe some type of restrictions. Well, how is government going to get us through this, and how we ourselves get ourselves through this difficult time as well? I think, you know, when you look at how he governed, you know, if we remember, Herbert Hoover did not rank well with the other presidents in terms of his approach. And so if we go back and we look here, he's number 36. Herbert Hoover is number 36, where FDR gets a ranking of 3. And again, I'm using the C-SPAN ranking. You could probably find maybe another website or another group that possibly thinks of the presidents differently. But, you know, why is he getting high ranking here during the Great Depression? You can definitely look at economic management. And you could wonder, you know, what goes into that, because if it's balancing budget, forget about it. FDR is going to blow that sucker out of the water. But if it's about maybe giving stimulus packages or some type of public works schemes, whatever it might be, fitting into there and changing how the economic system operates. I mean, that probably went in there as well. Crisis leadership. I mean, here we are in the Great Depression. And then he's also going to try to guide us through the Second World War. So here he is with crisis leadership. And if we look at in terms of his relationship with Congress, in order to get all those packages passed, you know, he's got to have a decent relationship and a bipartisan relationship there. Public persuasion, they talked about the fireside chats. They may have been infrequent, not necessarily weekly, but infrequent, but it was still a way to connect with you and I. So definitely there. In terms of equal justice for all, I mean, we could find some criticism, and I think, you know, giving him an 8 might be being very generous. You could probably put him even lower on that, but on Friday, we'll take a look at some critics of the New Deal, and we can see perhaps maybe New Deal not going far enough to helping others. All right, but still overall, I mean, the guy gets a 3 rating, so that's got to be pretty decent. That says something there. Okay, so your assignment is this idea of overhaul or overthrow. Can someone tell me what is meant by overthrow? Either put it in the chat or verbalize it. When they hear the word overthrow, what does that mean? All right, I see in the chat, take over, and yeah, you could say that, take over. And when you are overthrowing, you're taking something over and you're putting something new in place. All right, and so when we hear overhaul, what does that mean to overhaul? Someone think about a definition there, or their thoughts on it. Either verbalize it or put it in the chat would be fantastic. All right, I see making big changes, and it could be making big changes. I mean, I think if we kind of think of this idea of engines, and I know absolutely very little about engines, but yeah, it is about making some big changes, and it's about taking apart. You know, if we look at the engine here is our economy, and is he taking the economy apart and making some fixes, or is he trying to just, you know, take the whole engine out, overthrow, and put a whole new engine in place? All right, so I think that's what we have to look at here. So to take apart, to evaluate, I think is spot on with this approach. And so that's kind of what we're looking at in this cartoon in that first part. And then you have all these and then you have these questions too, you know, what's he trying to do here? So that's kind of getting at the questionings that, you know, I have been asking you right now. And then, but, you know, what is his alternative? If we can't get this thing working, what is his alternative? However, we learn in that video clip, ultimately, what gets us out of the Great Depression. Put that in the chat or verbalize it. What ultimately is going to be that stimulus to get the economy really moving and out of the depression.
Is it Social Security, by chance?
Social Security? No, not necessarily Social Security. Social Security is going to be a good one, but no, it's not. Aaliyah with World War I, that's not bad, but I would add another one to it. And so World War II. World War II is going to get us out of the Great Depression, which today is December 7th. It is, we'll call it Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. And even though the Second World War has already been waging in Europe, starting in 1939, or you can look at war already going on in the Asia-Pacific region with the Sino-Japanese War. So we're looking at about 1937-ish, around that time. And you could even go even further when Japan invaded Manchuria earlier in the decade here. But World War II is going to really be that ultimate stimulus. And you can see FDR was kind of backing away from the New Deal around 1938-39 as the world, or as Europe was in some ways prepping for war, and war is already going on in Asia Pacific region. So the second part here, get on task here, is dealing with all the different relief, reform, and recovery packages. And you know, you could go around the state of Minnesota and you can find still some connection with the New Deal program. If you're walking into the building and you're kind of like seeing some initials on the building as you're coming into it, and you're wondering, what the heck is that? That most likely is going to be a building created during the New Deal program era. So if you've gone to like Como Zoo, you will see that there are a number of WPA and PWA projects that went into that zoo, and you could find maybe those initials on it. Or if you went into St. Paul Harding High School, that high school was built with New Deal money. Or if you went into the airport in downtown St. Paul, Holman Field, that was a New Deal program to build that airport. And then if you've been up on the North Shore and you went to Gooseberry Falls, parts of that state park was built by New Deal program known as the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps. And there's a statue there as well to remember it. So that's what you're looking at with these programs, is how are they providing the relief? How are they providing the recovery? And how are they providing the necessary reforms? And then the BHQ, the big historical questions. And the video itself was kind of alluding to it, was, and this also comes down to your own personal opinion, because there's a lot of things that go into it, to your frame of thinking and how you're influenced it and your approaches. And so taking a look at, you know, how active government should be in these times, whether it's the Great Depression or the Great Recession of 2008 and COVID-19. Maybe you kind of separate the Great Recession and COVID-19 from each other, and you approach it as a multi-part response. Okay? So that's what you have for today. Do we have any questions about what I have talked about at this point, or any questions about the assignment that is due today? Well, I will stay on the Google Meet for a little while. And so if you do have questions, you can always ask me at that point, or come in during office hours, or just shoot me an email. With that, I wish you a wonderful Monday.